Welcome back, this is CerealSnax, and today I'm looking at a game called Alan Wake. It's an episodic game, psychological horror type game, and generally I don't play games like this because they scare me, and I did a review on Amnesia, and it was probably, well, it was the first impressions, and it was probably the last I'll ever play of that game because it was so scary. Alan Wake's a little different. It's more of a psychological horror, so kind of in the realm of like even Batman Arkham Asylum in terms of how horrifying it really is. It's really not that horrifying. The first few scenes kind of freaked me out a little bit, and then I got used to running around in the dark and shooting stuff. So it's on sale on Steam, and it's actually I think normally $30, and it's $7 for the entire weekend. So I suggest you check it out. It's one of the few games recently with a pretty good story and something that I believe I'm actually going to finish. I don't finish a ton of games. Well, actually I do finish quite a few games, but a lot of times, you know, the games that I do finish, I have them prioritized, and this one's at the top of my list right now to finish. And you can kind of see what I was doing right there. I was fighting these like dark presences. They basically have taken over the people in this forest. You're like in the Northwest, American Northwest, and your novel that you haven't written has actually come to life. And if that sounds confusing, then join the club, because it's actually a fairly confusing storyline and fairly interesting in that regard. It kind of reminds me of Stephen King novels, and actually Stephen King is referenced many times throughout the game, and that's not a bad thing. It definitely has that feel of like almost the Twilight Zone kind of storyline, and I don't want to spoil the storyline for you, so I'm not going to talk about the storyline too much. I'm just going to talk about the gameplay, because the story itself is good, and even if I talk about even the most basic parts of the storyline, I think it'll probably ruin it for you. But suffice to say that this area has been taken over by a dark presence, and it seems to be related to Alan Wake's own novels that he's written. So that's something that's happening. Either the dark presence has been created because of him, or it has become powerful because of his writing. We don't really know, but I'm going to leave it at that. And you can see the dark presence has actually taken over many parts of the environment. So there's some scenes here where you're actually fighting through like this bridge, and like it's come alive more or less. But the main antagonist that you face is actually these people that appear to have been kind of taken over by this dark presence. It's almost like they're zombies in some respects, so there are hints of that. And as you can tell, it's a third-person kind of shooter game. The main mechanic really is that you have this flashlight, which weakens the dark presences because they're obviously dark, right? And then of course you shoot them with the gun. Now this is another thing you get, is you actually are getting pages of a book that you haven't written yet. And when you read the pages, a lot of times, you can see this page here, he actually reads the pages out loud, which is a really neat aspect of the game. There's a lot of voiceover, and because I'm doing this review on it, you probably can't hear all the voiceover, but it's done very well, kind of in a Max Payne kind of style of reading. Like the guy's voice is pretty good. So, but anyway, back to the mechanics. Since we're here, there's a flashlight, and of course in this particular scene I'm actually getting a heavy-duty flashlight instead of my little weak flashlight, which is really nice. You get Energizer batteries to power up that flashlight, kind of a well-placed advertisement, I guess. And then you also get, you know, your guns. So once you've weakened these dark presences, you can actually shoot them. So you can see the advertisement for Energizer there. You pick up flares, and there's also flash grenades that you can get later on. And the flares are great because they obviously weaken the dark presences, allow you to shoot them. So here's kind of the combat. Things slow down. So here's these guys. I'm throwing a flare out, and you kind of run away. Now, I tried to use an Xbox 360 controller with this game and struggled. It's not as easy as I thought. It's actually, I find it much easier to play on the keyboard and mouse, so keep that in mind. If you don't have a controller, don't despair. You don't really need one. So for $7 this weekend, it's probably a good deal. If you're interested at all in psychological horror, Stephen King type storylines, then this is the game to pick up. The gameplay is actually pretty sharp. It's not a great, you know, but as you can see, I'm not having a ton of trouble, and it plays pretty well. And then of course you've got the story. There's a lot of cinematics in the game, and they're well done cinematics as well. Now I'm playing in the nighttime right now, and I'll show you the daytime here pretty soon. But there's a few other mechanics. So you basically, just like any first-person shooter or third-person shooter, you get different types of weapons. So I've actually upgraded to a gun, or a shotgun, and there's a revolver and that sort of thing. There's also these achievement things that you can get, like all these type of games, like these coffee thermoses. So in your stats you can see if you've collected all the coffee thermoses, and my assumption is that once you collect a certain number you'll get an achievement for it. unlock some kind of bonus, something or other. So, let's see, whoa, this guy's coming out here. So some of the enemies are much stronger than others. You can see the bigger type creatures are harder to kill. I might throw my flare down and start blowing them away. They're kind of freaky, these like human zombie creatures. And once you kill them, they just disappear because all they are is composed completely of darkness. And that's a theme too. You know, Alan Wake's wife is greatly afraid of the dark, and Alan Wake isn't afraid of the dark, but he becomes afraid of the dark because of this game. One of the other things here, you can see these yellow, there's somebody who's helping you in this game, and they have written on the walls in yellow ink, and it only shows up when you flash your flashlight over them so you can find secret areas that have items. There's no save system. You don't actually have to go and do quick save or anything like that. It's a checkpoint system, much like many console games. So, you know, but the checkpoints are close enough together so as to not irritate you too extensively. There are a lot of times I found where I just die over and over again, but luckily the checkpoints are close enough together to not make it a really frustrating experience. There was only one time so far in this game where I was frustrated because the save points were just a little bit too far apart, and I actually was out of ammo. And when you're out of ammo in this game, that's one of the downsides I think to this game, is you need to really conserve your ammo. But I was out of ammo and there was nowhere to collect it, and I was forced to just run past the enemies to get to the nearest light source, because when you get to a light source it destroys all the darkness areas around you. And I haven't shown really that light source mechanic yet. Right now I'm fighting this incredibly large bulldozer, which is controlled by the darkness. You can tell because it's kind of shimmering with darkness, if that makes any sense at all. And he got me on that one. So this particular battle is actually fairly far into the game, I believe. I think I'm on, gosh, maybe chapter 3 or 4. There's not much left, I don't think, of the game, regardless. But so they're getting increasingly more difficult, and really the strategy with this bulldozer is the same as many of the boss type battle strategies, and that's really just to expose the boss to as much light as you possibly can, whether it be through flares or your flashlight. And this bulldozer proved to be quite a challenge, and actually, oops, yeah, almost. Whoa, oh, yeah. Get out of here. Keep shining that flashlight on it. Of course, I have the high-powered flashlight, but still going through batteries like crazy. So hopefully Energizer will give me a sponsorship for this video because of the amount of Energizer batteries that I went through. Although it's not a really good advertisement, I guess, because batteries wear out really, really quickly. So anyway, let's keep shining this thing with light. We'll get through this battle. But see, you can see I'm just throwing down flares, and really it actually is damaging it, even though it doesn't appear to be damaging it. The gunshots and that sort of thing really don't work on these type of bosses. You really just have to, like I said, expose them to light. Like I'm shooting them, but I don't know if that really... Yeah, see, there we go. Boom, disappears into nothing. And let's move on. Now, there's another mechanic here, and I'll show it to you in a second, but there's actually some driving stuff. So it's not like a Grand Theft Auto type driving. It's pretty linear driving. So there's, in a way, it's kind of a mini game, and I'm not sure why they really included it, but it doesn't really detract from the game at all. It just doesn't really add anything either. So there's some scenes where you drive. I guess in a way, the driving scenes are nice because it kind of gives you some respite from constant horror. And one thing I would liken it to, one game I'd liken it to is the Brothers in Arms series, which was a World War II series about the paratroopers that land in, you know, obviously in World War II in France. That game was draining a little bit because, but all three of those games were draining because they're so realistic in terms of combat, and over time you feel kind of worn out by fighting. So this game gives you the cinematics, and it also gives you the car driving scenes, I think, to kind of relieve you of that, so you don't get kind of weary from just shooting these darkness creatures over and over and over again. Which I do have. I would have to admit that I have a little bit of weariness, but if it were not for the cutscenes and were not for the driving sections, I probably would be even more weary. See, in the daytime scenes also do that a little bit, because since it's daytime, you don't really, you feel a little bit more relaxed just because you know the darkness can't come out and attack you in this particular instance. So it gives you a break from that. So I'm just going to go through the little driving scene here. You can see that I'm just kind of trucking along, and like I said, it's not like Grand Theft Auto, and the truck doesn't control very well, and it's really just a puzzle. It's just a puzzle scene, more or less. You're driving along, and the goal is not to stop. The goal is to actually just find ways around these barriers. So here's a barrier here. We drive around in these little logging communities. One thing they've done real well, of course, is model this like the Pacific Northwest in America, and they've done a really good job of that because it does look a lot like those type of areas. You feel like you're in Washington, just driving around in the forest. And that also makes me not want to ever visit the forest in Washington, because I'll always think of Alan Wake and how these dark creatures came out at night in the forest. So that, I guess they've succeeded in that respect in terrifying me enough to not want to go to this location. It's kind of like those, like Jaws, you know, you never want to go up to New England and swim in the ocean where Jaws took place, because you don't want to get eaten by a shark. So, but maybe that's just me. You know, you may have, your mileage may vary on that. So here we are, just driving the road. Like the scenery is great, the graphics are great. You know, it's a very modern looking game. So pretty impressive in that respect. Of course, the main point of this game is to scare you and be psychological horror. It doesn't do it as well as Amnesia. I'm not sure that that's really the point, because it's kind of a combination of the story and the horror. But because of that, it does force nighttime upon you pretty readily. So in this particular scene, your goal is to get to this mine by noon, and an event occurs which does not allow you to do what you need to do at noon, and you end up having to do it at nighttime. So of course the game forces nighttime upon you, just like any horror movie. When you watch the horror movie and you're just like, why are you going out at night? Well, the characters always have some kind of reason why they can't go out at night, and of course sometimes that seems contrived, but that's what horror is all about. And we like to see the antagonist have trouble, and the protagonist have trouble, and he always will have trouble. So gonna pick up this last manuscript, and I think I'm gonna end the clip here. I just wanted to give you guys kind of your first impressions, although it's more of a review since I've played most of the game. I think it's worth picking up for $7 on Steam. It may get cheaper than that someday, but right now it's $30 as a regular price, so $7 is a really good deal for what I would say is hours and hours of entertaining psychological horror gameplay. So hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe and like if you did, and be sure to check out my other videos. Thanks.